Maybe that's like not a great place for like the time slot that I have. That I was like, okay, well, like where else do I want to go? And I was like, well, I've always wanted to go to Patagonia, and that's like summer, early fall there. That's perfect. I'll go there. So that's what I decided to do. I basically like booked a flight into Santiago de Chile, like the capital of Chile, and then biked south from there, essentially.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Laura Buchan. Laura's first bike adventure was in Taiwan, and she's the first to admit she didn't know what to expect from going headfirst into cycle travel. But the essence of exploring new places on a bicycle clearly got under her skin as she's continued to take on some huge adventures since. She has set off for a journey which would take her from Vancouver to the Mexican border, and what was unique about that trip was she was supposed to travel as a team of two. But just a short time before the start, her friend had to pull out. Laura, however, decided to change tack and go ahead with the bike tour regardless, choosing to set off solo. Now, this would be a journey of countless miles and experiences, which no doubt since shaped her mindset and perspective ever since. Sometimes people take on big journeys and it ticks that invisible box, so to speak, before they move back into a familiar lifestyle. But instead, Laura has embraced cycle adventures, and in 2023 she set off for another big journey, this time exploring Chile and Argentina, a South American adventure taking in the best of Patagonia. Once again, she set off solo into vast and wild landscapes, and I'm intrigued to learn more about this and all of Laura's adventures, to hear what it is about bike travel that she enjoys so much, to find out about moments which truly tested her, and also just how enriching choosing these kind of travel adventures have been. Laura Buchan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm excited to speak with you, Laura. I can't wait to hear about your travels. But a question which I start my show with, and I ask it of all my guests, is, Laura, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
Yes, it was the same bike that I think it was probably the first bike that I rode, the first bike both of my brothers rode. And it was actually a tricycle. Like, you don't really see many little kids on tricycles these days, but I think it's still in our garage. And it's this little tricycle. It's kind of like a dark purple maroony color, and it has like beads on the spokes. Yeah, so that would be the first bike.
Hang on, did I hear that right? Did you say you still have that tricycle?
I think it's still in our garage on a shelf. It's like pretty small, so...
You so need to send me a photo of that. That would be great. Because not many people have their very first bikes, and remembering them is really vague because of that.
Yeah, well, and it's also the same one we all rode. So, like, I still remember, like, my brother's, like, almost 4 years younger than me. So I, like, remember him riding. And we just rode it around the driveway. Like, we didn't get very far. But, yeah.
And I guess from that first bike, you've obviously since had other bikes. Did you ride bikes much as a kid?
A little bit. Like, as much as any kid who grows up in, like, a really standard North American sort of neighborhood does. We actually, our house, the one that I'm actually in right now, but also the house I grew up in, backs onto a bike path, and the bike path goes across through the parks kind of all across our city. We all used to go for bike rides with our parents. We could bike to school almost the whole way on the bike path and stuff like that. So we definitely did ride bikes, but I wouldn't say it was like an overwhelming part of my childhood. It wasn't like my biggest thing I loved the most. It was just like a thing that I did along with a bunch of other things I did. Yeah.
I mentioned in my introduction that your first sort of proper bike travel cycle tour was in Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
But what about before that? Was the outdoors something that you would take vacations around and your holidays were based on outdoor sort of stuff, or not at all?
Yes, growing up, me and my brothers were all in Scouts, Boy Scouts. Now it's like anyone can be in Scouts. We did like a lot of outdoor stuff through that. So we like went to lots of camps, and every summer we went to this like big like 10-day wilderness camp where you're like 11 years old and they hand you like a compass and a big backpack and they're like, see you tomorrow. And you're like, okay. So we were kind of like doing that outdoor adventure stuff from a pretty young age. And then in addition to that, like my family, I'm really lucky. My family loves traveling. So we've always done like a fair bit. And when I was 8, my dad took a sabbatical. And so our family went on like a 6-month trip and we went to 6 different countries through like Asia and the South Pacific. Yeah, so I was introduced to the world of like travel and adventure at a really young age. So it's always just been like a big part of me and a big part of my life. Yeah.
I have to ask the question, if I was to take you back to being that 11-year-old scout with a compass and a map and a backpack, did you embrace that? Like, were you excited or were you sort of a bit nervous?
So I wasn't in Scouts until my older brother went to that camp and they have a parent visiting day on the last day. And so we went out to visit him. It's about 5 hours from where I grew up. And I thought it was so cool. I would have been, I don't know, 9 or 10 at that point. So I hadn't gone yet because I wasn't in Scouts then. And I was like, this is so cool. They hiked really far. And they also did cool stuff, build their own bridges and build their own tables and stuff like that, just with twine and wood. And I thought that was really cool. And so we came home and I was like, Mom, I'm going in Scouts. I'm going to that camp. It's going to be the best. So I was super excited.
This is such a random question, and you feel free to say no, but on your big solo journey since, and I realise we live in a world where the tracks that we take and the routes that we follow, the roads we use, often could be on like a smartphone or a GPS bike computer, and it's a GPX trail that we often follow. But do you ever take a look at a paper map, and does it take you back to being a scout? Like your map reading skills would have been zoned in from such a young age. Like if you were to go out on a hiking trail, do you ever reflect back on things like that?
Oh yeah, like I always take paper maps on my trips because I just find you can spread it out and you can see a lot more easily like how things connect together and like where you are in the larger context of things. Google Maps and all that, I like that too. It totally has its place. It's a lot easier to figure out where you are on the map just using that as opposed to trying to like triangulate your position or whatever. But I always bring one and I love paper maps. I have a bunch on the wall in my room. And I actually was doing like a wilderness guiding course last fall in the mountains in Canada. Some of it was new information, but there was also some stuff I already knew, which turned out to be the map reading. And I hadn't really done a lot of technical map reading in a really long time, like using the compass and lining things up and stuff. But it just like came back really easily. And I mean, it made me feel really smart because other people were learning it for the first time. And I was like, oh yeah, I got this. So yeah, definitely the paper map skills are like, love knowing that stuff. And it's always also, I'm lucky in that it's always come naturally to me, the map stuff. One of the few things in life that I feel like just made sense to me from the very beginning, whereas other things are quite baffling. But I got maps.
Yeah, you're not geographically challenged that way. You can sort of follow your nose out of a place too, I imagine.
Yeah.
I love the idea that you've got maps on your wall, because does that sort of mean that when you go to planning out your adventures, have you started that by looking at a map and looking at places and terrain maybe, and I guess visualizing what it would be to be in some places?
Yeah, absolutely. I've almost spent so much time looking at the main map on my wall now that it's just like glued to the inside of my brain. But definitely I spend a lot of time like just like trying to figure out like how the different places connect to each other, where this border lies and like where this mountain range is and what would be the best way to like traverse through there and things like that. I think maps are super interesting. I used to have, right now I only have country maps, but I used to also have like satellite maps that showed more like topography and stuff like that. Right now I don't have those ones up. But that's really interesting too, because it's interesting to look at the world map without all the borders on it, because the borders aren't, in terms of landscape, like they're not real for the most part. So just being like, okay, like these are mountains and this is desert and like this is forest, and forget about all the socio-political aspects of it. Yeah, big map person. Yeah.
Something that struck me in my travels is how often a border is right near the junction of such a starkly different landscape often as well. And I'm not saying like there are borders where mountain ranges or rainforests or jungles or whatever, deserts cross over and the countries aren't changing. The landscape doesn't change with the frontier there. But quite often, or there are many instances where it really does. It came to me actually last year, my husband and I, we did our cycle tour was from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea across the Pyrenees mountain range. And We were always in France, so we never crossed over into Spain there. But we did cross over into different, I guess, regions in France or the departments. And it was interesting how much the landscape was changing. Even though we were on the mountain range, you could see why the border had changed of that part of the department and region as well. That was really stark. Have you noticed that in your travels?
In some of them, and then in other places, it's totally meaningless. In South America, between Chile and Argentina, that border until the very south, and then it gets weird, but it's mostly on the continental divide there, straight through the Andes Mountains. Alternatively, like when you cross from Vancouver to Washington, you're on the same bay. It's literally the same thing. Canada, too. If you go from Saskatchewan to Alberta or Saskatchewan to Manitoba, it's just, you're like, this is the same thing. And if you go into Montana, you're like, this is the same. And you go into North Dakota and you're like, it's also the same. Some borders, that makes sense. And some borders, you're like, that's you made that up.
Yeah. I mean, this is such a rabbit warren, and listeners will move away from maps and geological landscapes and borders. But if I take myself back to Australia, you know, one of our major borders is between New South Wales, the state of New South Wales, and Victoria, is the river there, the Murray River.
Yeah.
That's sort of a stark landmark there. Let's move away from maps, borders, and landscapes. I want to talk about this first dip of your toes in the water, head first into Taiwan on a bicycle adventure. How did that come to be?
That's like a pretty funny story. So, for the context, my friend Kirsten had a couch surfer named Gerard, who I never met. Gerard was like, I biked around Taiwan for free last year. And Kirsten was like, I want to bike around Taiwan for free. How do I do that? So Gerard gave her some contact info. And I guess so the Taiwan Tourism Bureau and Bike Taiwan or something they were trying to promote cycle tourism in the country. And so they were taking like a group of people and having them bike around the country and do like blogs and social media posts and stuff like that. And we'll get to who was on the trip later. But so Kirsten just emailed them. And for whatever reason, they were like, sure, Kirsten, you can come on this trip. And I wasn't like part of this. And so I went on my own trip and I was in Colombia and Peru. And mostly that was a good trip, but there was a couple days where I was having a pretty bad time. I got bit by a cat and I had to get rabies shots. And I was trying to leave this town that had no roads in the Amazon, but the internet was out. It wasn't totally out, but I was like really having trouble booking a plane ticket to leave because you can only leave on a plane or a boat. And I've had enough of boats at that point. And then Kirsten, so there was a bit of internet. She sent me this message and she was like, do you want to bike around Taiwan? And I was, what? No, I'm in South America. And she was, well, it's like free. They'll pay. It's all paid for. Okay, like now I'm interested.
Now I don't need to fund it from my own little savings. I'll go. Yeah, okay, you've convinced me.
Yeah, so she sends me this 6 questions that I had to answer to send to like an email address that was essentially just like numbers and letters at yahoo.com. And I was like, this is really weird. But I like answered the questions. I was like, whatever. And then a few days later, I got this email back being like, you can come to Taiwan because they had their 12 people chosen, but one of them had dropped out. And so they had just told everyone who was already coming on the trip, if you have a friend who might want to come, just get them to send this email to this address and we'll see. And so they were like, you can come. And I was like, this still seems fake, but okay. But they would only pay for the flight from my hometown in Canada.
So you needed to get back.
Yeah, but I was like, I do have to go back at some point anyway, so that wasn't really money down the drain because I've got to go home at some point. Yeah, so I flew home. I was home for 3 days. And then I went to the airport with this weird plane ticket, with no other plane ticket I'd ever seen, but it was real. And I just like got on a plane to Taiwan and I was like, this is so weird. And then I got there and everyone else on the trip, except for Kirsten, who I don't even know like why we were there, but other people were like, there was a psycho blogger with like 40,000 Instagram followers. There was a model who was in a Coca-Cola commercial. There was like a guy who used to bike for Team Australia. And I was like, I technically know how to ride a bike. So it was bizarre.
You could have told them my first bike is still in my basement. Can I just say quickly, Kirsten, if you're listening, I don't know who your contacts are, but let me know who they are. I wouldn't mind a free little holiday junket on a bike as well.
Yeah, so I'm like, here, this is crazy. And then this was like a supported tour. And we rode these little, like, they were high performance folding bicycles. So we're on these little folding bikes. They're called the Pacific Reach T20. I think it's a Taiwanese brand. I mean, they were great. They were really kind of weird looking, but worked great. And we rode around the island of Taiwan. We stayed in hotels of the sort I will never stay in ever again because I don't have money. We were like staying in these fancy hotels and eating these like elaborate multi-dish Taiwanese meals, and it was just bananas. I also thought I was going to die the whole time because I'd probably biked 60 cumulative kilometers in like the 5 years previous. Like I was not prepared.
And Taiwan's pretty mountainous too.
Yeah, especially like so we came down the west side, which is pretty flat cities and like kind of industrial, and then we came back up the east side, which is really mountainous.
There's a big cycling event. I think it's the
Yeah.
Taiwan KOM,
Yes.
King of the Mountain Challenge. Yeah. Did you have to do that on the folding bike? That would have been hilarious.
Maybe we did bike over like the highest paved mount road in Taiwan, so it might be that. I was like, I didn't even know where I was half the time.
You would know because it's 100 continuous kilometres of hill climbing.
Oh no, I did not do that.
Why do I know these stupid facts? But the last 10 kilometres, I think, average over 10%. So it's insane.
I felt like I was doing that because I was like so not a cyclist at that point.
It's all relative, isn't it? Exactly. It may as well have been for you. You were on your limit. Like, what did you say? You cumulatively, in the previous 5 or 6 years, how many kilometres would you have ridden?
60. Like I didn't bike at all. Like I had a bike that was out in the basement. Every once in a while I'd be like, I guess I'll get that out, tootle around a little.
So I'm intrigued then about that, Laura, because I can understand the motivations to go there 100%. Someone else is paying. It's a full, all expenses paid for adventure, right?
Yeah.
You love travel. I'm here for that. But it's interesting that the activity that you were doing, you didn't feel fit for from a fitness point of view. But obviously there must have been something that you liked because you've since done these big adventures doing that same activity. What was it? Was there something that sparked something you knew then about Taiwan, or did this happenstance organically, totally separate from that adventure down the track?
No, it was definitely related. So like even though I thought I was going to die, I thought my butt was going to fall off my body.
Or singe into it, right? Like it burns.
I also had the best time. I just found it to be like such an in-depth way of like experiencing a place. Even though like we were supported, there was a big like, a group of us, a lot of things were organized for us, but it was still the speed at which a bicycle travels. And I was going particularly slowly, but it's faster than walking because walking it'll take a long time, but it's so different than riding on a bus. I was like, I feel really connected to this place. Even though I'm only here for less than 2 weeks, I'm in significant pain. I haven't had to organize a single thing since I arrived, but I still just feel like I'm okay, this hill goes up and this hill goes down. I'm waving to people and I'm noticing little things you would never notice from the car. And then I just also have something I love is when you're coming down a hill, like obviously everyone loves coming down a hill, but you're going so fast, your pedaling is impotent. And then you get to the bottom and that first pedal stroke where your drivetrain re-engages and you just feel super powerful and connected to your bike, connected to the landscape. And I remember just feeling that. Like I came down this hill into this beautiful, amazing valley. And I just remember the moment that my pedal stroke engaged. I was on a bridge over this beautiful river. And it's just this really powerful memory to me. And I was like, this is the best thing. This is the best thing that I've ever done. And then when I finished the trip and got back to Taipei, and we'd cycled something like 950 kilometers in 10 days. And it was just this feeling of, I never thought I could do something like that. It was so beyond. I didn't have the confidence in my body or my mind. I was just, I don't know, I might have to ride in the van the whole time, but I didn't ride in the van at all. It was just this sense of, I don't know, accomplishment or something that no travels had ever given me before. I was like, this feels meaningful in a way that backpacking in Thailand or something did not. Because I've always wanted to travel. I've always wanted to see the world. But after a while of going hostel to hostel and riding on a bus, there was something starting to feel a bit hollow to me, I guess. I don't know what this is. But then once I was on a bike, this feels so different and it just feels so much more, I guess. It really like hits something in me. It's hard to almost describe.
It's definitely, I guess, a stark moment in your life. It's almost like a sliding doors moment. Had the Taiwan trip had not happened, it would be interesting to see what you would have done instead. Because looking back at what you have done since, bicycle travel is a big feature. I mean, you even work at a bike store now as well, don't you?
Yeah, part-time. I only have a couple more shifts now because I'm leaving, but That was like between my trip down the coast and my trip to South America. There's this bike shop in town, and I kept going back because I was like, oh, I need one more thing. Like, oh, I need one more thing. And then I was there one day, and the guy who's my manager now was like, would you ever want to like work at a bike shop? Because I was just
There anyway.
I think also he likes to have kind of like a mixed team, and at that point all the girls had left. So I think that kind of helped me out too. Like he was like, we need some women in here. So and that was how and then I was like, yeah, but I'm going to South America. He was like, just start when you get back. Like a week after I got home from South America, I started at the bike shop. A year and a half later I'm still there. So
That's awesome. So then you get back from Taiwan, and how quickly then do you start scheming up this idea of going down the Pacific coast?
it was quite a while in between. I knew I wanted to do a bike trip. But you know, sometimes life just gets in the way of the things you want to do. In between that bike trip, a number of years elapsed. Part of it was COVID. Like, I probably would have gone sooner if it wasn't for COVID. And then I got a dog, which made everything complicated, but I really wanted a dog. But then in 2020, I like saw a touring bike on Kijiji. It's like Facebook Marketplace before there was Facebook Marketplace. We had Marketplace, but Kijiji was still cool in 2020. I just like bought this bike because I just sold a camera and I had the same amount of money the bike cost. And I was like, I'm gonna buy a bike. So I bought this touring bike. It was like a Trek 520. I still have it.
Oh my gosh, so many of my guests have ridden Trek 520s. You're another one on that list. There you go.
Great bike. So then I had this bike and I was like, well, now I have the bike. And that was when it really started out. But it was always just, I'm going to do something. I don't know what, but I'm going to do a thing. And then so it was actually my friend Kirsten, the same one who invited me to Taiwan. It was her idea to bike down the coast. So I don't really remember like how it came up, but it was probably like early 2021. And she was like, we should bike to Mexico. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do that. I wanted to do a thing, but I was like, I couldn't pick a thing. And I was kind of a little really caught up in teaching and all the other things going on. Also, it was like COVID. So that was a whole thing. I just was like, sure, yeah, let's bike to Mexico. We were like, well, we bike to Mexico or into Mexico or to Guatemala. Like, where are we going to go? We don't know, but we're just going to like head south. And so we were planning and scheming, and I'm like making arrangements for someone to take care of my dog and buying like a million things all from Facebook Marketplace because usually I didn't have enough money to go buy a million new things, et cetera, et cetera. And that was how the idea was born, I guess. I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what. And then she had the idea, so I just glommed on. Yeah.
And then it transpires that, I think, was it like a month or less than a month before you're both set to take off? She then says, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going?
Yeah, so then that's like the hilariously ironic part is that it was her idea. And about a month before we were supposed to leave, she was like, I can't go. Yeah, basically she wasn't coming. Her job extended her contract and she has a really cool job. She works on an orca research team on the coast. So she researches whales. So it is super cool. Yeah, super cool. I'm very jealous. But yeah, and it was an opportunity she might not get again. She was like, if I leave, I might not get to be on the orca research team again because they'll replace me with someone else. And it's always easier just to extend the person who's already in the job than to hire a new person. And I was, on the one hand, there was like two hats. Like on the one hand, I kind of get it. On the other hand, I was not happy, like very upset. Definitely cried. I don't know, I just felt like very abandoned. Like in hindsight, I'm like, I get it. Life is complicated. At the time I was, yeah, no one loves me.
Well, it's also, you know, when you anticipate something.
Yeah.
The whole part of this trip you're anticipating with your friend there. So when they're not there anymore, what you were anticipating is gone in a way. And also, I guess you had that sort of moment of, well, am I even going? And you obviously decided to go. Like,
yeah.
Did you nearly not go?
Not really. So after I talked to Kirsten, I phoned my other friend. You know, you have that like friend you phone and you're like, I need solid wisdom. So you phone Dana.
Hi, Dana. You're the wise one.
And Dana was like, you just have to go anyway. She's like, you just have to go. I don't think my mom was that happy about it necessarily. She was like, what if you just took like a bus? And I'm like, that's not the point. I listened to Dana and I was like, I'm just going to go. Yeah. So that basically, I felt like a lot less sure of myself. am I going to make it? Am I going to hate it? And am I going to have the worst time ever? I also didn't know like how to fix. Kirsten also used to work at a bike store, so she was the one who knew how to fix stuff.
Oh, she was going to be like team mechanic on this
Yeah.
trip, and you were now all of a sudden. So I guess there's those concerns that would come, because I'm thinking I've ridden my bike alone many times. I've ridden alone on my own to places a handful of times, but the majority of my bike travels have been with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sort of putting myself in your shoes. If I'm planning an adventure with a friend and then all of a sudden that friend's not there and they're the one I was thinking of that I could rely on for like mechanical support as well as emotional support during the day, I don't know what I would be thinking. Like, did you then sort of like fast cram how to fix stuff? Did you even concern yourself with that, or did you sort of go into it as a c'est la vie, what will be, and I'll figure it out when it happens?
It was like a little column A, a little column B. So I was like, okay, I feel like the two most important things to know how to do are like my brakes and my tires. So I learned those. Like, I was like, I'm gonna learn how to like mess around with my brakes. I sort of knew how to change a tire, but I have really small, weak hands, and the tires I was using, Schwalbe Marathon Plus, are like really hard to get on and off, and I can never do it. So I went and I bought this like special tool for getting your tire beat over the.
I have one of those. I can't even think of what it's called. K something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like a tire pincher thing. Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant but bulky. But
yeah, I was like, I don't care. It's going in the bag.
I've never actually had to use mine in the wild, like out on the road. I've used it at home before. You haven't either?
No, I didn't get it. The only flat I got on that trip was on the way from. I took the train back from San Diego to Vancouver, and on the way from my hostel to the train to go home, that was the only flat I got on the whole trip. And I was like, I'll just pump it back up. It's not very far. So I just like rode on my rapidly deflating tire to the train station. And I was like, I'll fix this in Canada. I don't care. Like,
that's cool. So, well, flat tires obviously weren't a feature, which is pretty good. Did you have any major mechanicals or anything on that trip at all?
Some brake problems that ended up being like beyond my ability to fix in the first week, I guess. I ended up getting them fixed in Port Townsend, which is like this amazing, cute, wonderful little town in northern Washington. My brakes were like making this awful noise. Brakes make awful noises, but this was like next level, and they weren't working that well. And I kept trying to like do stuff with them, and it wasn't working because I sort of learned, but whatever. And then so I took them to this. I actually want to give a shout out to this bike shop called the Recyclery, and it's in Port Townsend. And I went there, and the owner was, oh, I'm going to do the work for free because you're doing a cool trip, and I just want you to be safe.
How awesome.
It was so nice.
Oh, shout out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And he gave me like 20% off on the part I needed to buy too, just because like he was like, you're doing a cool trip. And then he put in new brake. I guess my brake pads have been contaminated, which at the time I didn't even like know was a thing, but I'd got something weird in them basically, which is why nothing I did fix them. So he put in new ones, and he actually put in e-bike rated ones because he was like, you got a lot of stuff on your bike, like it's heavy, so it makes sense to use these. And he adjusted them because I had a really big problem with they would just like, no matter what I did, they just kept rubbing. In the end, it turns out they weren't great. Like the brake calipers I had on my bike weren't like great fit because they were the ones I'd put on later. And I've switched them now, but he was like, for now, what I've done should work. And I did not have another problem with my brakes for the rest of the trip.
That's good. Because as you said at the start, brakes and tires, like they're the critical components, really. I guess the next one would be like headset and then chain and then gears. Like gears obviously need gears, but worst comes to worst, you can still actually pedal a bike even if your gear cable breaks or something happens. You just might not be in the most nicest gear.
Yeah.
Okay, let's backtrack then. I want to know about the first week into that trip because I feel like a lot happens in the first week of a big adventure in that it's the nerves building up to it, it's the finally getting started part, and then, you know, there's potentially day 3 or 4, the crises of confidence, oh my gosh, how am I doing this for so long? And then it's the, wow, I'm doing the thing, I love it, I want to do it forever. So you have all the emotional stuff and you start building, I believe, into a bit of a rhythm and a routine. Do you have memories of all of that type of stuff happening on your first week?
Yes, it was like my very first day. It was the same day I moved out of my apartment. I'd left my car full of like all my stuff in my friend's driveway. And then I locked my door, put the key under the mat for the landlord. Because I lived on this little island called Bowen Island, which is the kind of place you can leave a key under a doormat and it's fine. And there's like a ferry direct to North/West Vancouver. So I got on my bike and it was like all loaded up, but like I hadn't really ridden it anywhere loaded up ever. And I was like, time to go. And I lived at the top of this big hill. So I bike out of my driveway and down this hill to the ferry terminal, but I wasn't used to my heavy bike. So as soon as I stopped, I fell over.
Oh, it's a great
And
start,
I was
isn't it?
like, and then I get on the ferry and everything's fine. And I'm holding my bike and like waiting to get off the ferry. And then the ferry slammed into the loading dock and my bike fell over backwards, dented someone's car. And I was just like,
This is a great start, isn't it?
yeah, I was like, this is going to be a disaster. I can't even get off the ferry without ruining something expensive. I thought I was going to cry. Like, I was like, this is going to cost like all the money in my bank account to fix this guy's car. He's going to yell at me. He's going to be so mad. And he gets out and he was like, that's pretty bad. He's like, it's BC Ferry's fault. And then all the people who were like standing there were like, it's BC Ferry's fault. Because everyone hates BC Ferries. They're always mad at them. I don't know if it was actually their fault. I've never driven a large boat. But he was like, I'm just going to go after the ferry for it. Have a good trip. And I was like, the kindness of strangers.
It started already, hasn't it? Like there's two accounts: the bike store owner fixing your brakes, and then this just gentleman not taking you for everything you have.
Yeah.
That's day one. Some big things happen, but okay, take me to I don't know the end of week one, and not specifically, but just I don't even know how far you would have gone on that first week. If you reminisce to how you might have felt. Did you feel you were finding a rhythm? Were you loving it? Were you unsure of yourself? How did you feel?
It was kind of a mix. I'd made a few critical errors in terms of I didn't realize that Google, if you started putting in directions in Google Maps, it would give you the distance in miles, and I just wasn't thinking about it. So I was biking a little further than I'd planned to. Like I was like, I've made a mistake. Yeah.
That would throw me. Is that hang on, is that like because you're over the border or?
Yeah.
Because hang on, can I just ask?
Yeah.
Canada, you use kilometres in Canada?
Yeah. We do a weird mishmash thing. Like we do use imperial for some things, just I think because we're so close to the States. But for any long distances, we use kilometers. We'll use like inches and stuff for like small amounts. Just it's like a weird system, but
because factoring in like you're reading something and it's I don't know what distances you were doing, but the difference between 60 miles is or just over is 100 kilometers. Like there's a fair distance here. How many hours a day were you riding?
I don't know. Maybe like 7 or 8 probably. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's a tiring day, isn't it?
It's a long day. Yeah.
I think once you're into month 1 or 2, you get into that rhythm, but week 1, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because then you're layering in your emotions with fatigue. So you're feeling tired by the end of that first week.
I was feeling tired, but also like kind of, I guess, inspired because on the same track of like kindness of strangers, I just kept meeting nice people. You've probably had guests who've used warm showers before. Yeah, and so I'd gotten on warm showers, and in my first week or 10 days or so, I stayed with 3 different hosts. That was the part of the trip where I stayed with people the most. So I'd stayed with someone in White Rock, which is like just before you cross the border into the States, and they were like so nice, and they bought me ice cream. And then the next night I stayed with some people in Bellingham, and they were so nice, and they also bought me ice cream.
I love that we're talking about food.
Yeah, I'm a big food person. And then the guy who fixed my brakes in Port Townsend, and he was really nice. And then I stayed with this family in Bremerton, which is across the inlet from Seattle. And they took me to their family barbecue. And I was holding babies and petting dogs and just having the best time. And I was just like I was so tired, but I was also like, people have been so nice to me. Everyone's just been like so kind and so generous. And also, weirdly, this sounds so funny now, but because Kirsten didn't come, when something bad happened, it was like because she wasn't there, I could just blame it on her. Like, I'd be like, this wouldn't have happened if Kirsten had come.
Do you talk about this with her?
Yeah.
At the moment? Okay. So this isn't going to be news to her ears.
No, we're still friends. I was mad at her for like a week. I was pretty mad at the time, but like we're friends. And it was almost like she was like a ghost-like figure, and it was like being able to place your frustration on something outside of yourself. It's not my fault for not, because I'm by myself and I wasn't supposed to be. Yeah.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit then. Maybe fast forward is the wrong term. There's moments when you plan a big trip, right? And remember when I was saying how you're visualizing being in places and stuff like that? Did you have sort of milestones for this journey of yours, of like where you had, I don't know if you looked at a map on your wall then, or you had mini milestones to reach, or you're looking forward to seeing certain destinations? Can you remember any of those and maybe choose one and take me there, what it felt like to be there?
I mean, there was so many. The biggest one for sure was crossing the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I'd never been to San Francisco. I'd never seen the Golden Gate Bridge. It was a figment of my imagination. And then all of a sudden it was right in front of me. California will almost like symbolize in my mind, like you're not what it is. Oh, how do I put it? It's like you're definitely not in Canada anymore if you're in California. It's different from like Washington feels a lot like BC. Oregon kind of feels like half BC, half California. But then once you're in California, you're like, yeah, this is not where I'm from. Like I am traveling.
What is it about it? Is it the culture there? Is it the people there? Is it the landscape? Is it everything?
The vegetation, the people, you're getting like more and more kind of like Spanish sort of influence. And then as you go, all the vegetation in Washington is like the same as BC. And then Oregon's kind of like half and half. But California, you're in Northern California and there's the redwoods and you're by the ocean and there's people surfing everywhere and there's cactuses or wildlife you've never seen. And you're going through these cool old logging boom towns that are like really like architecturally interesting. And it sort of had like symbolized this place in my mind. I built it up, but in this case, like building it up worked for me. Once I crossed the border into California, I was like, I'm in California. And then once I got to the Golden Gate Bridge and I was like biking across the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco, where I've always wanted to visit. And San Francisco just like it seems in my mind, and it is in real life too, so far away from where it started. And it's also like it was about 2/3 done the trip, I think. And I was okay, like if I can make it to San Francisco, I can do the whole thing. San Francisco was a place where I'd said, like, if I'm having a really bad time, I'll go home from San Francisco. Like, I was having a really good time.
It was your reassessment or bailout point if you needed to.
Yeah.
To proceed, you would take an assessment of what the journey was doing for you. And if you had too much, you'd go home. And if you were enjoying yourself, you would continue on. So you did continue on, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And how long did this whole journey down the Pacific coast take you?
It took like 7 or 8 weeks.
It's not an insignificant amount of time.
Yeah. And some people do it like a lot faster. But I had, first of all, probably not capable of doing it faster. Second, no interest really in doing it faster. I was soaking it in. So.
Are you someone who, during your adventures on a bicycle trip, do you take a pause and go hiking, visit places, or is the journey itself what you're doing on the bike? You might see places you go, oh, I'd like to come back here one day without the bike and see it more.
I do a bit of both. I definitely didn't do as much hiking and stuff as I would do on a trip without a bike. Partly because I was always like, I don't really know where to leave my bike for like 8 hours that I feel good about it when you're like in a park or something. I did a few. What did I do? I stopped probably about 10 days over the course of the trip where I stopped somewhere for a day or two. A few less as I went along because I didn't need them as much. But like, and I definitely stopped. Like I spent like 2 nights in San Francisco. So I had 1 full day there. And there was like my hostel had a place I could put my bike. And then like I spent 2 full days in Los Angeles. And then I spent, I guess, 2 more full days in San Diego just because I was waiting for my train. And then I spent like a day in the redwoods and did some like little walks and stuff around there. So it was kind of a bit of both, but like more about the bike journey.
Did it meet your expectations? You come away from a journey, like it might have been 7 or 8 weeks, but I feel that amount of slow bicycle travel, the things you experience in that time, they sort of embed into your personality and the way you perceive and view things. It changes you, I believe. Did your perceptions of the trip before you set out meet the reality once you got to the end?
I think the reality like exceeded my expectations. I didn't totally know what to expect. The biggest thing that I came away from both my bigger trips with is that there are just like so many like kind, good, generous people in the world. Like I just met the loveliest, most amazing people, and I just like came away from the trip just feeling everyone is so much more connected than I think we ever realize. especially somewhere like America that's so much in the news, and not always for like good reasons. And you kind of have like perceptions of it going in, and then just literally the friendliest people. I think Americans are friendlier than Canadians. They were so nice. And just like the ability to connect, even with people who you can tell from like the stickers on their car, like probably believe different things than you can still connect on that like really human level. And it made me I wish everyone could go on like a 2 month bike trip to somewhere they have ideas about. Because I think we would all just understand each other so much better. Yeah, so that was like my biggest takeaway from both trips, but this one specifically, like the people, I just met the most amazing people, and I was like so inspired by just their generosity and their openness and their like willingness to connect, and people who wanted to help me. I had so many people. I was like coming up to this big stretch of construction in Northern California, and people were pulling over in their cars to warn me what was coming up, just to make sure I was like prepared for it and stuff. And it was just so kind. I've always believed people like can be good, but it was like they just are. It changed my approach to other people. I think I'm a lot more like friendly and open and generous than I was before I did the trip. And that's something I've really tried to like pay it forward since, I guess. And I always want to like have that with me.
Mixed in with that, were you ready for that journey to be over when you reached your destination?
I wanted to keep going forever. I couldn't because I had definitely maxed out the the generosity of my mother who was caring for my dog.
I have to ask, totally random, but what sort of dog is it and what's its name?
His name is Theo. He's lying on the floor behind me.
Hi, Theo.
He's kind of just a mutt. I think he's a lab, border collie, German shepherd. He's like a
bitzer is what we would call it in Australia. He's a bitzer this and a bitzer that.
Yeah, he's a black dog. He's like about the size of like a Labrador. Friendly, little banana. Like he's just like a silly guy. Yeah, he's a good dog.
I wonder how you felt being away from him for so long, because I'm sure he was as excited as ever when he would have seen you. But I've interviewed a few guests who have journeyed with some dogs as well. And I just think, whoa, that's a whole new level of complexity to take bike touring.
Yeah.
Did you miss Theo? Like, on one hand, you don't want the adventure of your life to end, but then on the other hand, is there this sort of bittersweet moment where you're sort of looking forward to things that you'd been missing as well?
Yeah, I'm always I always miss him. He sleeps in my bed, so, and we go camping together and stuff. So whenever I'm without him, I'm like, where is my soft, warm lump? I don't know. You just get used to having them around, and you're just, who do I sing little songs to now? Like,
would you ever consider the feasibility of even taking him on a bike tour? Like, I've seen people, they have like a kitty carrier attached to their bike, and the dogs, because it's a bigger dog.
Yeah.
We're not talking like a little Shih Tzu or something like that. We're talking a big dog here.
If he was 10 pounds, 100%, he'd come on every trip. But because he's so big, like, I have to get a trailer. I'd probably have to train him to like run with the bike at certain times if there was like a really steep hill or something.
The practicality sort of goes out a bit, doesn't it?
If I had the right gear, I would take him on a trip through like the Netherlands or somewhere flat that doesn't have too many like crazy traffic, somewhere with more bike paths too, because I have this horrible image in my mind of him being in a trailer and getting like smoked by a car, and it just seems unfair.
No, let's move away from that.
Yeah.
Let's move away from that morbid thought.
I don't think he'd be a great bike trip dog either, because he's just very like, I don't think he'd like sitting in the trailer all day. He's a good hiking dog because he likes to go. I think sitting in the trailer for him would be like a bit dull. I think he'd be like, why do we have to do this?
So, moving away from the idea of touring with Theo, you finish your trip, you reach your destination, you've learnt a lot about yourself, about the people, about the states as well. You get back home. How long does it take before your mind starts simmering with thoughts for another bike tour?
From the moment I got home, I already knew I was going to go on another trip really soon. So that was the year I turned 30. I turned 30 in April of 2022. And at some point, I don't even know when, I just decided like the year that I turned 30 is just going to be like a year of adventure. Like, I'm not going to worry about saving money. I'm not going to worry about my career. I'm not going to worry about this and that. I'm just going to like do adventures. Originally, I was thinking of like doing a really long hike, the Tiararoa in New Zealand or something like that. But I kind of have like a bit of a bum ankle from a really bad running injury. So I was like, you know what? I can hike, but maybe I can't hike for like 6 months.
Fellow ankle sufferer here, so I'm with you there. I'm really torn about it because I want to get into hiking really big, and my ankle doesn't seem to want to do it as much as I do.
Absolutely. I totally get that. Yeah. And like, same thing with like, I used to really like running. I still kind of like running. And I was like, I'm going to do a half marathon. And my ankle was like, no, you're going to do mostly 5Ks forever.
No, we differ there. I tried running and I'm happy to not run. I'll stick to bikes. But okay, so pretty much straight away you're thinking about another adventure. And was South America high on your list? Had this always been something?
I was originally thinking to go to Southeast Asia. And when I was researching the seasons, best time for me to do it that year was like kind of like January, February, March, because I went like just a few months later. It was like 2 big trips in 1 year. But then I was like reading about the seasons, and in Thailand and Laos and stuff, like they've got this time of year that's kind of in that like January, February, March, that's burning season, and they burn off all the old crops.
Oh, and the smoke is horrendous. Yeah, no, the smoke is really, really bad. Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's like not a great place for like the time slot that I have. That I was like, okay, well, like where else do I want to go? And I was like, well, I've always wanted to go to Patagonia, and that's like summer, early fall there. That's perfect. I'll go there. So that's what I decided to do. I basically like booked a flight into Santiago de Chile, the capital of Chile, and then south from there, essentially.
What an adventure. So did this adventure start on your bedroom wall map?
Yeah. I don't even... Well, and also, okay, so my older brother, this is important context, he was the first person in our family to do a bike trip.
Oh.
He did it in like 2014.
Shout out to Laura's brother. Where did he go?
He went to South America, so he biked from Cusco to Santiago, and he was originally supposed to go further, but ended up coming home for like a variety of reasons, including some of his stuff got stolen and some other things happened and stuff like that.
Legitimate reasons to end a tour.
Yeah. Yeah, so he came back. He like was like, I'm happy I did that, not for me, kind of thing. And I remember watching him at the time and being, crazy brother, why are you riding your bike so far? Which is like, oh, how the turntables. Like,
fast forward 8 years later, here you go.
Exactly.
Okay, so he'd obviously told you stories as well then about his time there and whatnot too. No
Yeah,
doubt.
he had a blog. He's like a quieter guy, so we hadn't told you as much as you might think. Is he like? But every once in a while, like, you get a story, and then so I was almost like picking up his trip where he left off because he finished in Santiago and I started in Santiago, so it was like picking up the baton.
Wow, that's awesome! It's like a family relay. Can I ask, totally random, has he gone on trips since then?
Not bike trips, no. He's more of a hiker. Like, he's done hiking trips, weaker, so kind of things.
You've taken the relay on then, and you're going further south there.
Yeah.
What sort of things... Well, actually, no, I want to backtrack. That trip that you took down the Pacific coast, originally meant to be with your friend, ended up just being with you solo, right?
Yeah.
And then you did this South America trip solo.
Yeah.
I've got 2 questions for you. One, did you ever consider doing that not solo? Trying to convince your friend that couldn't make it then, hey, do you want to come to South America with me? Or 2, do you think, had you done the Pacific trip, down the Pacific coast with your friend, do you think you would have taken on solo adventures? Hey listeners, if you're loving the stories and adventures I'm bringing to you each week, consider supporting Seek Travel Ride by buying me a coffee. Your donation helps me keep the show going strong and bringing you even more inspiring content from our guests. Just head over to the Seek Travel Ride Buy Me a Coffee page. Every little bit helps and is deeply appreciated. Plus, it's a great way to show your love for Seek Travel Ride. I've included a link in the show notes. Thanks so much for being part of our community and for your support. Okay, now back to the show.
So for the first part of the question, I didn't know a single person who could have that time off who would also want to go on a bike trip. So I never really tried to find anyone to go with. Because I was doing like this casual on-call teaching thing, like I could just tell them I wasn't available for 3 months and just go. It was like no issue. And I don't know anyone else who had that flexibility in their job because it's like not very common. I never really looked for anyone to go with. And then in terms of like a solo adventures thing, I'd been doing like solo travel before I started doing solo bike rides. Most of my traveling has been just by myself. The bike aspect does add a new dimension because you're further out from places. There's more random stuff that can just like totally go wrong. You're like actually alone, whereas when you're backpacking, there's always people around. Whereas on a bike, there was times where I was like, yeah, I really am the only person out on this stretch of road. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I would have been more scared going into it. I think I probably would have still done it. Because I think hiking down the coast, if Kirsten had come, still would have been like a big confidence booster for stuff. But I think I would have been like more nervous going into it. Whereas because I'd done that other trip by myself,
You've got this.
and I was like, I can do a wilderness trip, I can do a bike trip. This is just like a slightly more wildernessy bike trip. I can do that thing.
It's logical to think that. I mean, hey, you had those map reading compass skills from being an 11-year-old in Scouts. So, you know, you were trained for this 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
I want to take you back to a quote that I came up then from you from that South America journey. And you said, "This trip has been one of the hardest things I've ever done. I've had to rally my optimism more times than I can count. And there were many times where I wanted to quit. It has definitely been an adventure." Is that something that you wrote at the time that you've forgotten about now? Or does that still resonate with you?
It still resonates. It was a hard trip. Doing that trip solo gave me more confidence to do my next trip solo. And I think I was almost slightly overconfident. Like I was like, it'll be fine. Because I had so few problems on my trip down the coast. And then my trip in South America was just kind of an endless series of problems. The majority of them were like not problems I could have prepared for. They were just bad luck. Some of them were me being stupid and like thinking I was like capable of things that I didn't have the right bike for and like stuff like that once or twice. A lot of it was just like, oh, there's an unprecedented heat wave and now you got bed bugs and now you got bed bugs again. And now all your stuff, you had a mechanical that because the road was so bad that your wheel alignment is like whack. Oh, you met a creepy man. Things like that. It was hard. And I had awful, awful weather. So first it was a heat wave. It was almost 40 degrees first couple weeks of my trip. It was so hot.
Yuck.
Yeah. And then I had like a week or two of nice weather and then it rained. It just poured rain for like the rest of the trip. And at the end it snowed. I was really, really unlucky with my weather. And that just made everything else harder. It caused more gear problems. It caused, I spent way more money than I meant to because like when everything is soaked and you're freezing, like, you're like, I'm not camping, I'm finding a place to stay. And Patagonia is expensive. It is. They said it was expensive and I was like, sure, whatever. And then I was like, oh, it's expensive.
I wonder if it's like the South American equivalent of Norway.
It totally is. Yeah, 100%. It reminded me almost of New Zealand. Everything just costs $1 million. Yeah.
I mean, Australia's not cheap and New Zealand takes it up a notch from there as well.
Yeah.
And money is definitely a thing on a bike travel. As you said, wild camping, that's what makes it so doable for such a long time for many people is, you know, you can travel big distances on a very, very minimal budget.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was so wet. I was like soaked through for half the trip. I have a picture of me on my Instagram, just like making a dumb face at the camera. And you can tell that I'm just like completely wet. It's like pouring rain behind me. There's potholes that are just like filled with water. And I'm just, it was just
freezing cold as well. Like, was it freezing?
It wasn't freezing to actually freezing till the end when it was. It was cold. Like I was cold.
I got to ask you actually, because you're Canadian, when you say it wasn't freezing, is that a Canadian thought of freezing or we don't need it to be minus 30 to be cold? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, in terms of physics, I think it was not below zero for at least most of it. At the end, it was. It was frost.
Oh, yuck.
Getting up in the morning.
So different to like a Southeast Asian smoke fest, isn't it?
Yeah, I was like, between the smoke fest and like numb fingers, it's hard toss-up, hard choice.
My gosh, do you know what would be an absolute breeze for you next? Just taking like a, I don't know, Eurovelo 1 route or something through Europe down the Atlantic coast.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that you'd enjoy it as much after having Patagonia. And like, don't get me wrong, people, there's a lot of good stuff to look forward to in Europe, but I just feel like you've leveled up so much in the places that you went.
Yeah, I was talking to my friend. I was like, I just can't decide if I should go to Kenya or Kyrgyzstan. And she was like, what if you just did something easy? And I was like, oh.
No, you need to, I don't know if you've done it yet, but you need to listen to my episode with Tara Weir, another Canadian. She's been to both Kenya and Kyrgyzstan, so you should listen to her adventures and seek her out. She will give you some great tips. The best adventures lie in the least travelled places.
Absolutely.
Says me, who's not been to either. In that quote, I mentioned you thought about quitting many, many times. How close did you come to quitting? Like, tell me a day where that was seriously, potentially going to happen.
Yeah. The day that comes to mind is it was in Argentina. And over the course of the trip, I think I was only in Argentina for like 3 weeks out of the whole like 9 or however many it was. So what happened the lead up to this day was I'd had some really big problems with my wheel alignment. Like it was totally, it was messed up. Yeah, it was messed up. And so I'd had to like hitchhike a little ways to this town called Chosmalal. And then in Argentina, it's pretty like fast and loose with the opening hours. So it's incomprehensible if you're like not used to it. And I never did get used to it. I was like, I don't understand why this store's not open. It's 11 a.m. on a Saturday. But the bike shop was closed for like 3 days for no totally discernible reason. So I was just like in Chosmalal, like hanging out. And Chosmalal is like fine. It's like not a place you would go on purpose necessarily. Like I liked it. It was a really nice town, but it's not like a tourist place. There was like a little tiny hostel there. I was the only guest for most of the time I was there. And then finally the bike shop opens. They fix my bike. I don't even know what they did to fix it because the guy who fixed it didn't speak any English and my Spanish was pretty subpar. So I was like, great, bike works, awesome. But in that time, the heat wave had intensified. So it was like hitting those kind of like 40-degree temperatures. And the next stretch of road, I probably could have got to, I can't remember if the town, the city was called Zapalos or Zapato, but one of those. So I probably could have got there. But then after that, there was like a few hundred kilometers with like no towns, no obvious water sources. And I think I just have to take a bus. I don't want to die.
That's a reasonable thought.
Yeah, totally. So I like got my little bus ticket and the guy at the bus station was like, you have to take a bus to Zapalos or Zapato, and then you've got to change a bus, and like, this is the company you'll change onto, like it'll be easy. And I was like, okay, great. So I put my bike on the bus and I get on the bus, that part's fine. And then I get to the bus station and I like go and line up to get my next bus ticket, and I see a sign in the window that says like no bicicletas, so like no bicycles. But I like stayed in the line. I was like, maybe there's like, I don't know, I'll just see what happens. And I get there and she's like, no bicicletas. And I was like, yo tengo bicicleta? Like but I have a bike. Like, and she was like, no bicicletas. And I was kind of like, my Spanish is just like, I was starting to get like kind of like worked up. So my Spanish just fell out of my head entirely. And I was just like, ¿por qué? Like, it's just useless language skills. Um, and then.
Did you just look desperate? Because sometimes just being desperate and people take pity on you and just bend the rules. I want to know what happened.
Yeah, so this was like not like a pitying lady. And she writes this thing on like a piece of paper and it said like 12 de julio. So to me it meant 12th of July. That doesn't make any sense. It's like February. Like what? And so I have this piece of paper that says what I think says 12th of July, and she sends me away. And I have no idea what I'm supposed to do because I was like, I can't bike to Junín de los Andes. Like it's too far. It's too hot. I'm going to die. And I just like sat down. It's like after a number of things had like already gone. I'd just been having a rough time and it was so hot. And I just like sat on this bench and I started to cry. And I was just like sitting on this bench, like, crying in a bus station in a part of Argentina that like, tourists don't go to and like, no one speaks English. And I'm sitting there with my bike, just like crying. And I was like, this is also super embarrassing. I'm like sitting on a bench, like crying in public. And this lady comes. Argentina, like I know I said like the Americans were nice. Argentinians are like the next level of the nicest people. Like I have so many stories of the Argentinian people just being so kind to me. And this lady comes and sits beside me and like, gets out Google Translate. And the first thing we established is that we're both named Laura, which was yeah.
Wow. Yeah, random.
Yeah, like she was like, mi nombre es Laura, and I was like, mi nombre es Laura también. Like, my name is also Laura. And then she's kind of like trying to like figure out what's going on. And I'm trying to go to Junín de los Andes, but the bus doesn't take my bike and I don't know how to get my bike there and I can't ride because it's too hot. And so she eventually went to get the station inspector, so kind of like the bus station manager. And this lady comes over and like, figures out the problem. And we're like talking with Google Translate. And then she ends up getting the other bus station inspector. And I do not know what's going on. Like, I'm just like following blindly. And this lady's like, come with me. Like, this is all in Spanish. And I'm just like, I think she's saying, go with her. Like, okay, I'll go with her. I'm pushing my bike. We go to the parking lot and she owns this tiny little car. I don't know if it's Fiat or Fiat, like those little cars.
Yeah, little Fiat. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're really popular in Argentina. You don't see very many of them in Canada. But so she's got this little Fiat and it's tiny. And she like opens the trunk and puts my bike in. 2/3 of it fit inside, and then she just like ties it with a strap, and then she's get in the car, and I'm like, okay. So then get in this car, And it's a standard. So we're like driving through. She's like stalling the car at like the intersection. And she keeps like looking at me and being like, don't be sad. Don't be sad. It's okay. Don't be sad. Like, está bien. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then we finally turned down a street, and the street was called Julio Street, and 12 was an address. So it was number 12 Julio.
It's not the 12th of July. You need to go to number 12. Oh.
It was a cargo bus company. And so it was called Via Cargo. We go in. She like rapid fire Spanish. They wrap my bike up in like plastic. It ended up getting sent to San Martin de los Andes because everyone was confused at this point. So I sent myself there too after. And so they wrap up the bike. It costs like $20 to like ship my bike like a few hundred kilometers on this bus. She drives me back to the station. She basically holds my hand while I buy a bus ticket. She like walks me down the street through like the kind of like downtown to like get a bit of cash from the ATM because I was like had to spend more cash than I thought to like ship my bike. She sets me up in like the corner of the bus station, makes sure I have my ticket. Even the original bus ticket lady was like making sure I was okay. Everyone was just, this poor little like foreign girl doesn't know what's happening. We gotta get her to San Martin de los Andes.
Otherwise she's going to die in the heat wave.
Yeah.
What a story. Do you have a photo of these women?
No, but I wish I had taken one. I was like so overwhelmed at the time.
Yeah.
But they were so kind. And I was just like the thought of a bus station manager in Canada in a million years, like driving you and your bicycle across the city to ship it.
No chance in Australia. Zero. Oh, look, there's going to be a listener who emails me and says, well, actually, but in my experience, no chance.
So nice. And then Libus was like a bit late and finally comes and I just get on and I was like, this has been a day.
Has it what?
Yeah.
Wow. Laura, I always ask my guests to tell me about one day of their trip. And that wasn't the question leading into this, but I feel like you've perfectly told me about one day of your trip. I can't ask you for another one. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. On that word, wow, something that I've really come to appreciate in hosting this show is that feeling of awe and that emotion of awe that we get when we're in landscapes that literally have our mouth open wide and our eyes as alert as possible. South America, Patagonia, Chile, Argentina, that area of South America has landscapes which I feel would merely put everyone on this planet in a state of awe. I'd love you to tell me about a moment of awe on your trip, coming around a corner or being in a landscape. Hopefully they weren't all clouded in with, torrential rain and you got to see some pretty incredible sights. But yeah, tell me about a moment of awe on your trip.
Oh, man.
It's like a tangent to tell me about a day, isn't it? Tell me about a moment of awe.
So unfortunately, a lot of it was very clouded in. I basically have to do the whole Carretera Austral again because I couldn't see anything. It was just clouds. Very unfortunate, but...
Motivated to go again, though, which is good.
Absolutely.
You can go to that bus stop and find the ladies.
Be like, thank you. Muchas gracias.
Yes.
But when I was further south off the Carretera Austral and I was going into Torres del Paine National Park in Chile, and I came in the back way because there's two different ways you can go in, and I was going to a specific campground, so I went in that way. And you start biking, and the morning I got up to bike into Torres del Paine was actually clear. It was clear. I was like, it's a miracle. The sun shines upon us. I've never been so happy for like a clear, not even a totally clear-ish sky. And I'm like,
what a place to see a clear sky as well.
Yeah, I was like, it's not raining. Ooh. And you get your first little glimpse of I always say the name of it wrong, but like the Paine Massif, the mountains. And they're cool. It depends where you are. Some places like mountains build up gradually with like foothills, but these ones, they just like come straight out of the ground. They're crazy. Like, I don't know if you've been there.
No, I haven't, but I've seen images and they are stark on the landscape. Absolutely.
It's wild. So you can see them from really far away. And then you guys and you're like, okay, like there they are. But then the closer you get, the more amazing they get. And the view just gets better and better and better. And it was every time you came out of some trees or like turned a corner, you were like, it's amazing. And you just keep going and going. And then once I'd actually entered the park and I'd got my little pass, I was biking on this road and there was the beautiful mountains they're not actually wild horses, but they like free range in parts of the park. So there's these like horses by the road and these beautiful mountains. And then I come around another turn and there's a lake, and the mountains were like reflected so beautifully in the lake. It was just amazing. It was just because like I'm really a really lucky person. Like I've seen so many beautiful things. I've seen so many beautiful places, but this was breathtaking. Like I was like stopped in my tracks. I was like, I've never seen anything like this stunning ever in my, like, this made all of the weeks of bicycle suffering I just put myself through absolutely worth it. This is the most beautiful, amazing sight I have ever seen. And it was just like a landscape. It was just, I don't even have the right words to describe it. Like it was just, I want to go back there and just like spend 2 weeks hiking in the park. It was just the most amazing. There's just like nowhere else like that on earth.
And it's landscapes like that. I've said it a few times on my show. They make you feel the size of an ant because it's so stark. It's so huge. It's so indomitable. It's just ever present on the scene. And you realize that, you know, Mother Nature's massive and we're just like this little thing. I'm in the Pyrenees. I recently went on like a really mini bikepacking hiking adventure and biked to a campsite, stayed a couple of nights, went day hiking, came back, which was fantastic. I want to do more of that. Little mini micro adventures, nice reset, reboost, re-energize.
Yeah.
And we went to a pretty famous part of the Pyrenees here. It's a UNESCO site, the Cirque de Gavarnie. And it's stark on the landscape because the Cirque itself, it's like a 6-kilometre natural rock wall amphitheatre that rises 1.5 kilometres of rock straight up in the sky. And it's 3,000 plus meter peaks all around, and you've got peaks that are 2,000 meters higher than you, and you just feel itty bitty small. There's like a waterfall that drops like 440 meters, I think, vertically. Like, whoa, this is massive. And I feel like when you're describing that day there, that's how I felt just in this landscape. I just want to be here. I want to drink it in. I want to inject nature into my veins. It's that sort of feel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just nothing like it.
And you never forget it, do you?
No.
Doesn't matter how many times you go there, or, you know, you've been there once, but you could go there again and you'll still remember the first time and you'll still remember the next time. And my gosh, I'm so glad you had blue sky.
I know. Yeah, it was like partly cloudy, but like it just made it look more dramatic, I think.
You need a few little clouds, just not on the summit, just not covering the peaks.
Yeah.
Right?
And the next day it was like pouring rain again. So I was just like, I'm so happy I biked in yesterday. And then the day after that, I got like an actual legitimate sunny, nice day. And I did like the hike up to the Las Torres, which is like classic Torres del Paine.
The classic peak. Yeah.
I was going to do the hike the next day originally, but I was like, it's sunny.
You got to do it. Take the moment.
Trailhead was like 37 kilometers away. So I was like, I'm hitchhiking there. So I hitchhiked to the trailhead because I was like, I can't bike there, hike, and bike back. Like, that's too much. I hitchhiked there, went up the trail, and I was like, the sun is out. And then I hitchhiked back, and I was like, I hitchhiked intentionally with success. Like,
I love these little moments that you've had. And it's sort of like the confidence to actually even do that.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I just think it's absolutely brilliant. All these journeys, if I think of, Taiwan has been so different to the Pacific Coast Trail, which was so different to your Chile and Argentina trip. 3 different journeys, but each of them probably gave you self-assuredness about yourself and confidence in what you could do, and totally different experiences at different ends of the emotional spectrum. Taiwan, you were like, I don't think I can make this, and you did, and then you got that sense of pride.
Yeah.
The Pacific Crest Trail, you got an insight into the kindness and humanity of people just constantly. And then it sounds like Argentina and Chile, they sort of put you to your limit, but somehow you probably realised that you had a lot more grit in you that you didn't know that you had as well.
Yeah.
I guess all this is to say is that the thirst for bike travel, it's still within you. I imagine you are constantly scheming more trips.
Yeah, it constantly. It's like it doesn't stop. It's like a fixation.
Are you buying more maps?
Yeah, I just bought 3.
Awesome.
I got one of Tunisia. I thought that made sense. And then I got one of Sicily because it's like right near Tunisia. And then I did buy one of Kyrgyzstan as well. And I bought a new bike, it's new to me bike.
Well, what did you get?
I got a Salsa Fargo. It's like a slightly older one.
Yeah, it's a bit of an adventure.
Yeah, it's got bigger tires on it, which was like my biggest gear takeaway from South America, I was like, I want mountain bike tires. Yeah.
It's an insight into knowing that you want to take on more rugged terrain and trails. And, you know, if you're thinking of the Kenya Bike Odyssey or you're thinking of Kyrgyzstan, that's what you need.
I did its first little trip. Me and my friend went to Montana at the beginning of July and did a 3-day trip just like through the mountains there. So it was kind of like its inaugural journey.
Yeah, whenever I think of the mountain, I think the Great Divide mountain bike route, it goes through Montana, doesn't it? Were you on that route?
Yeah, so the reason we chose that route is because my friend, he biked about, I don't know, a third of it or something a few years back, but he had to skip that section because he had like kind of like a mechanical, and he had to like detour far to buy a part or something.
Yeah.
We did the section that he didn't do when he did that month-long trip.
And there's so many adventures ahead of you, and listeners, Laura mentioned a map of Tunisia made sense. It's because very soon you're going to be finding yourself actually living there, teaching there, right?
Yes.
So huge adventures await for you on a totally different continent.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple weeks I'll be in North Africa.
Yeah, and listeners, I was joking with Laura before I pressed record that I feel like her bike adventures have been some of the best preparation for this new chapter in her life, really. You've problem solved on many trips and you're going to thrust yourself into a totally foreign country, totally different culture, but you already know that you've got the wherewithal to deal with everything, and you've got the curiosity in yourself with that zest of travel and adventure to really want to take it on too.
Yeah, and I'm really excited. And like, as I sort of mentioned just when we were chatting earlier, it was something I kind of thought about doing for a while, like teaching abroad, because like I am a teacher. But I think I really do think the bike trips were like what gave me the confidence to like actually take the step to like actually do it. Like I was like, I can do hard things.
Oh, fantastic. Well, if people want to watch you do hard things in the future, how will they be able to keep up with your adventures and how can they find out more about you?
So I have 2 ways. So one is my Instagram. It's Laura _is_on_earth. So Laura is on Earth, but with lots of underscores between each word. And then I also do have a website. The website is a work in progress. If you get there and you're like, this is a weird website, it's because it is a weird website right now. I don't know what I'm doing, but it's just lauraisonearth.com.
Awesome. And listeners, I will provide links in the show notes to both of those ways that you can find out and keep up with Laura's adventures. I'm really intrigued to see where your next adventure takes you, Laura.
Yeah, me too.
Where is that Fargo going to take you?
Yeah.
Well, Laura, as I wrap the shot, there's 3 questions that I ask all of my guests. The first one is, you get to pick a song now as a guest that goes onto the Seek Travel Ride music playlist. Each song on this playlist has been chosen by a guest. It's available on Apple, Spotify, and most recently, listeners, on YouTube Music as well. Laura, what song are you going to choose to be the soundtrack to your adventures?
It's a really hard choice because I listen to a lot of songs when I'm biking. But the one I ultimately came down to, because it was like the theme song of my coast trip, it's called California, in brackets, Cast Iron Soul, by Jamestown Revival. And it was like the soundtrack to my trip where I was biking towards California. And even though it's like a little extra about California, I feel like it's just got a vibe. It's just a song for like heading somewhere on the road.
A soundtrack for a road trip.
Yeah.
That's the best thing for a bike adventure.
Yes.
All right, you are down. I have got you there. Final 2 questions. Laura, one day you have got the choice and you can go in one direction on the road which takes you up a never-ending, really hard hill climb. Constant, no breaks, no flats, no downhills, just always uphill. The other option is dead flat, but you are going to be pedaling into a never-ending constant headwind. Which of those 2 would you choose to do?
I never get to go down.
You don't get to go down the hill, no.
But does the hill have a view?
Potentially. If I want to skew the answer to this question, I'm going to have to tell you no, you're on like a virtual trainer.
Oh, no.
That would be horrible.
Those were truly the options, and the hill would just never go down and there was no views. I guess I'd take the headwind, but
I'll let you have a view.
if there's a view, I'd probably take the hill. Yeah.
Okay. You know, if I want to make more people on Team Headwind, I'd say there's no view, but I can't give you parameters that other people didn't have. So, all right, Team Hill Climb, come to the 90-something percentile of us. You're on the team.
I feel like climbing hills, you can just plug something in and like I can zone out on a hill climb, but I can't zone out on a headwind. I'm just like, it's just not. Yeah.
You would have had some headwinds in Patagonia, no doubt.
Oh yeah, it was no bueno, as you might say.
Yeah, no bueno, exactly. Yeah. Final question. You get to choose to ride your bike for 4 hours one day, and you get to choose whether you're going to do 4 hours on your own solo or 4 hours with other people. Which one would you choose?
That's an interesting question. I'm like one of those people, you know, some people are like proud extroverts and some people are proud introverts, and I am like right in the middle of that, and it changes. And there's definitely some days where I'll be like, leave me alone, and some days where I'll be like, look, friends. I think just because I've done so much like cycling just by myself, I'd probably choose the group.
That's a fair answer.
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes to find like a group of people to go for a bike ride with, but I can always go for a bike ride by myself.
So a bike ride with other people. I've got you down there.
Yeah.
Well, Laura Buchan, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you here, to learn about your adventures, to hear about how you fell into bike travel on that trip to Taiwan, that fully paid junket, to the adventures that you've had since. As I said, down the Pacific Coast Road, through Argentina and Chile, on a plane soon to Tunisia, where new adventures come your way, your Fargo's going with you. Thank you so, so much for sharing your stories and experiences here on the podcast for Seek Travel Ride.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Well, listeners, I really love digging into Laura's story there. The energy that she told her adventures tales with was really palpable for me on the other side of the computer screen here conducting the interview. I love just how she really fell into bike travel. By the sounds of it, traveling solo and seeing places, she's always had that sense of curiosity, but discovering in that ridiculous trip in Taiwan that, oh, this is the way to see places, that's really stuck with her. And it was really obvious to me that that curiosity has stayed with her probably ever since that trip. And I can only imagine the type of adventures that Laura is scheming away with now. The story, though, of the bus station and that whole drama playing out, wow, couldn't you just imagine that occurring to you on a journey that big, feeling like the way forward was over, the heat wave is too much, the distance between services is too far, and that there was no way. And then yet, as time and time again, we've been shown on this show by our guests, the kindness of pure strangers and hospitality that they will give to help you find a way and a solution to keep your adventures going. It came through again there for Laura as well. And I especially loved hearing that story. Listeners, if you are enjoying listening to the podcast and you want to help this independent podcaster out, feel free to click the link on Buy Me a Coffee. Every small amount helps to go towards the running costs of the podcast so that I can keep delivering these weekly episodes to you and you can keep filling up your cup of wanderlust listening to the stories of my guests. The link is in the show notes if you'd like to buy me a coffee. I really appreciate all of your support. And until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.